Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. It feels like everyone at some point has the same question. Am I on track with my retirement savings? How much should I have saved by now? The problem is there isn't one perfect answer. Even the experts don't agree. A lot of materials we see out there from Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, JP Morgan Chase are all attempts to answer that question. But remember, these checkpoints are created by humans. And these humans are influenced by the companies they work for, by their own experiences, and the assumptions they have to make when writing for the masses, not individuals. Fidelity uses what's probably the most famous savings guideline out there. The idea is simple. By the age of 30, the goal is to have the equivalent of your annual salary saved. This is a really early milestone that sets you up for long-term compounding. By age 35, it's 2 times your salary. By age 40, 3 times your salary. At this point, you're probably really going to notice compounding taking over. Fast forward to the age of 50, we're looking at 6 times your salary invested. This is past the big halfway checkpoint to that 10x savings goal. And finally, by the age of 67, when you step away from the workforce, the goal is to have 10 times your income invested. Fidelity assumes at this point your investable assets would be enough to cover about 45% of your pre-retirement income. The remainder of the gap would be filled by Social Security, and this should be sufficient enough to last you for a 30-year retirement. It's clean, it's simple, it's easy to remember, and honestly, it's kind of become the gold standard in financial media. One thing that can get confusing with this when we look at 1x, 3x, or 10x your salary, Fidelity isn't talking about your starting salary. They're talking about your current salary at that age. That's the one we want the multiple of. So let's put it into real numbers. If you're making $60,000 at age 30, the benchmark is to have $60,000 invested. By age 40, if your salary has grown to $85,000, then the target is 3 times that, so about $255,000. By age 50, if you're earning $120,000 a year, Fidelity's guidelines says that you should have around $720,000 invested. So in other words, your checkpoint grows as your income grows. It's pegged to your salary at your current age, not the one you started with. Now, I know a lot of people push back on this barometer because life isn't always this perfect, predictable pattern where you're getting these steady increases in pay throughout your 20s, your 30s, and 40s. Instead, it's more likely that you have stretches where you have a plateau and then maybe sudden jumps in income. And in this case, maybe you started out on track with Fidelity's benchmarks, and then all of a sudden you get a rather large pay raise. That's a good thing. But you look at the Fidelity benchmarks and it looks like you're behind. Here's the truth. You're not behind. A pay jump is always a win. Yes, it might reset the math on your benchmarks, but it certainly doesn't erase the progress you've made. Look at the pay jump for what it is, an opportunity to continue to grow your investing and your savings rate, not the chance to feel defeated. Fidelity's framework is designed around a few big assumptions. First, you're saving at least 15% of your income. That includes both your contributions and your employer's match. That's the fine print. It also assumes you're invested in a diversified portfolio. This would come with long-term growth that helps to keep you on track. And finally, that you retire at the age of 67 and spend about 45% of your pre-retirement income from your investments and cover the rest with Social Security. Now let's pause for a moment and go beyond the basics. Fidelity's last assumption that we discussed, that 75% of your pre-retirement spending is going to come from your investments and the remainder of the gap coming from Social Security, this is something we want to talk about. Fidelity doesn't explicitly say single income earning household in their marketing materials, but their benchmarks really are built around one earner's salary. Now that works pretty cleanly if you are a single income earning household, but what if you're a dual income earning household? They haven't published a separate set of multiples for savings targets. So for that, you do have a couple other things you want to consider. At first, you might be saying, just treat the household combined income as the base and use that when figuring out your multiple. So if you have a household income of $200,000, you would say by the age of 67 to 10x that, you'd want $2 million invested. And that's great from a savings standpoint, but we have to consider Social Security as an income source in retirement, and that's going to play a factor here. When looked at like this, you might end up at the exact same savings target, but you have to consider that Social Security scales per worker. So here's the nuance. If you have a single income earner facing poor market conditions and drawing conservatively from their portfolio, yes, their investments might only cover 45% of their pre-retirement income, with the remainder of the gap being filled by Social Security. But with a dual income earning household and 2 Social Security checks and the ability to share costs, well, that can put you in a much stronger position. Take this example. Let's say you and your spouse both retired at the age of 67. One of you is getting $2,700 a month in Social Security, the other $2,300 a month. That's $5,000 a month combined, or about $60,000 a year. Now suppose your household spending target in retirement is $90,000. Social Security is already covering $60,000 of that, which means you only need to pull $30,000 from your portfolio. Let's go back to your working years. Let's say your household income was $120,000 a year, and that you hit Fidelity's target of 10x your income. That's $1.2 million saved. If you're only withdrawing $30,000 a year, that's just a third of your spending needs, and more importantly, only 2.5% of your portfolio. That's well below the 4% rule and puts you in a very sustainable spot. But the real point here is that with Fidelity's 10x rule, you might find that you end up with a portfolio that doesn't replace just 45% of your spending needs. It might replace 70 or 80% of your spending needs in retirement. But also, if you have 2 Social Security income streams coming into the household, you simply might not need that much from your investments. The real genius of the Fidelity savings benchmarks is that you're really front loading your savings. If you can hit those first benchmarks, having 1x your salary by 30 or even that benchmark by 35, you really allow compounding to take over. By the time you hit 45, 50, 55, you might very well find that you are way ahead of these benchmarks and ahead of the curve, and that maybe you can retire earlier than expected. The pros with this plan is that it's aspirational and it's motivating. These benchmarks create strong habits, especially for young workers. Also, it's incredibly easy to track. You know exactly where you should be by every birthday. And again, it really front loads growth. Early discipline allows compounding to carry you later on. As far as the cons, this can truly feel unrealistic. If you graduate late or start your career in debt or have a major expense in your 20s, hitting 1x your salary by the age of 30 can feel impossible, and for some, that can really be discouraging rather than encouraging. It's one size fits all. Not every career path neatly fits into these milestones. For those careers that maybe have a late start, or careers that suddenly experience a big jump in pay several years into the career, they might need a different framework to work with. It also assumes a steady savings. Sometimes real life can be a little bit messy, and maybe you don't hit that 15% savings target. You might have years where you can save more and years where you're forced to save less because you have higher expenses. Life is a little bit less neat than what is presented here. The bottom line is I like to think of Fidelity's plan as aspirational. It may not be a perfect fit for everyone, but if you want to be aggressive and build a cushion, it can absolutely be a great fit for you. The key here is that you want to be saving consistently throughout the course of your entire working career and working towards financial freedom. But there is no one right path and there is no one right answer. These are just to be used as a general guide to help you know if you're on the right track.